And this is what happened this week. Our week began on Thursday with the much-anticipated free trade agreement between the UK and Australia currently up for post-Brexit negotiation.
I want a world in which we send you Marmite, you send us Vegemite.
No. As the negotiation began, we received word of a new tactic from the UK that was below the belt.
A diplomatic brawl has overshadowed Federal Trade Minister Dan Tehan's first official trip to London for post-Brexit free trade talks.
Negotiations got off to an awkward start when a UK newspaper reported the UK Trade Secretary Liz Truss was planning on deliberately seating Mr Tehan in an uncomfortable chair for hours as a power play so she could gain the upper hand.
An uncomfortable chair. You think you can intimidate Aussie arses? We are a nation that sends toddlers sliding down these steel bad boys in 40-degree heat. And I can't think of a tougher arse than Dan Tehan. He laughs at the idea of an uncomfortable chair. In fact, he laughs at the idea of chairs in general. So while the UK has accused Tehan of being glacially slow with negotiations, I say that he's been sitting on his arse strategically.
I haven't brought a cushion with me to use on the chairs.
To Friday, and as the COVID crisis in India worsened and its hospitals ran out of oxygen, the nation's wealthy and famous hopped on private jets and got the hell out of there, showing that while the virus doesn't discriminate, money certainly does. And under pressure to commit to net zero emissions, this week the government tried to claim some climate credit with a massive new investment.
The PM's injecting hundreds of millions of dollars into hydrogen development.
Like you have a Silicon Valley, you've got a hydrogen valley.
Not sure he understands that Silicon Valley isn't where they make the silicon, but apart from that, I am all in. You know, I was always a bit sus on snowy hydro, but this SCOE hydro sounds like the real deal. So how do we get this hydrogen?
Making pure hydrogen can be a dirty business, taking vast amounts of energy to electrolyse water into hydrogen and oxygen. So-called green hydrogen's the solution. Renewable energy, solar, wind or tidal, used to power the process.
OK, so we get green hydrogen by using renewable energy. That sounds like some inner-city wine bar hydrogen to me. Surely there's a more Aussie way we could get some good old green and gold hydrogen.
At the moment, fossil fuel-derived hydrogen is the cheapest way to do it. So that's what we're using in industry at the moment, using natural gas.
Bingo! Fossil fuels. I finally understand how this gets us to net zero. We burn the fossil fuels to get the hydrogen, then use the hydrogen to power the new carbon capture hubs to capture the carbon emitted by the fossil fuels that we're burning to get the hydrogen. And that is how you make net zero. Difference. Armed with whatever the hell that is, the PM joined over 40 world leaders on Zoom for the Climate Summit, which, wouldn't you know it, was the very next day.
All of us, we have to step up.
And as is tradition, Greta Thunberg reminded the world leaders that, given the opportunity, she will dance on their graves.
We, the young people, are the ones who are going to write about you in the history books. We are the ones who get to decide how you will be remembered.
You'll be too busy fighting over water to write any history books. Then came Australia, quite a bit later. And sure, by then, Biden had said bye then, but that didn't stop our PM making himself heard.
It's a pleasure now to call upon the Prime Minister of Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Mr. Prime Minister, I'm not sure we're hearing you here.
Poetically, he was on mute, or as he calls it, clean sound. Luckily, our hydrogen-powered PM had some great new material to fall back on.
Mr. President, in the United States, you have the Silicon Valley. Here in Australia, we are creating our own hydrogen valleys.
Pitching a thing that doesn't exist to a person who wasn't there. I think he was better on mute. To Saturday. And a leak from hotel quarantine resulted in a community transmission that plunged Perth into lockdown, as explained by 7 News Perth. And see if you can spot the virus.
Closed too late after at least one fellow diner got something they didn't order, catching COVID-19
it's all over
from
the chairs.
A Victorian man sitting at a different table, enjoying lunch, not knowing he was infectious.
That's
the day
a big
after
blunder.
He was released from hotel quarantine.
Oh no, she's got it now.
That's where he was infected.
And in Adelaide, the thrilling conclusion to the crime of the century, homicide, life on the Sesame Streets.
It's the mystery of the missing bird.
There's been a brazen bird
kidnapping. Detectives caught in to find Sesame Street's Big Bird after he was taken from a circus show in Adelaide.
Now, the costume itself is not cheap. It's worth $160,000.
Well, hang on. Big Bird's feathers are worth 160 grand. And he still makes Oscar sleep in a bin? No wonder that guy's so grouchy. So, who broke Bird?
What sort of thief are we looking for, do you think?
I'm not quite sure. Someone who's very interested in a lot of yellow feathers.
Suspects include Kylie Minogue, RuPaul and this Big W feather duster. After a desperate hunt, the Big Bird thieves were plucked.
Well, they sparked a statewide manhunt and now the self-proclaimed bird bandits have been busted.
Cold, alone and with ruffled feathers, but Big Bird finally home.
Exhausted and clearly traumatised, Big Bird was then breathalyzed and carried away in a scene that will haunt any child who sees it. That story brought to you by the letters W, T and F. On Sunday, there were Anzac Day services across the country as a grateful nation acknowledged the sacrifice of our veterans. Then there was this striking cover from the West Australian, which really says it all.
A mystery unknown soldier, a lone hero, a war veteran who decided to make a stand and march on Anzac Day without a mask and despite Perth's strict lockdown.
Except, turns out...
That's how Michael Darby was described by Perth's daily newspaper on its front page. Wrong.
I'm not a veteran, I'm an admirer of veterans.
An admirer of veterans, a veteran enthusiast, if you will, who was also a former political staffer and an anti-lockdown activist.
Resist, rebel, refuse.
Lest we fact check. Next, Monday. And anyone who was anyone was in Union Station, LA, where the Oscars were being held for the first time. The Today Show was down the road.
We're in downtown LA. It's the first time that the awards are actually going to be hosted down here. They've moved to a train station, and it's a train station that we can't even get near.
Best Picture went to Chloe Zhao's Nomadland for Frances McDormand's gutting depiction of homelessness, that we can only assume resonates with the homeless people removed from Union Station for the event. And closer to home, WA Premier Mark McGowan, seen in this image from 9 News Perth, preparing to go full Godzilla on the whole city, announced the end of Perth's gruelling 3-day nightmare.
The snap 3-day shutdown is due to end at midnight.
Oh, they've cleaned the
It was
chairs.
sparked after a returned traveller tested positive after leaving hotel quarantine.
Well, we've been saying for a long time these hotels are not fit for purpose, and to continue to use them is negligent.
The important thing is not to blame the hotels. They've been doing this by the book.
And they're still having school balls and high teas in the same building, in the same lifts and air conditioning as these COVID positive people are being moved through.
Yeah, I'm with Carl. What? You know, worst case scenario after a school ball, you should walk away with some hurt feelings, or if you're lucky, herpes. To Tuesday, and a bad day for Channel 7. Ben Roberts-Smith stepped down from the network to spend more time with his controversy. And a video of Scott Morrison speaking at the Australian Christian Churches Conference leaked, and we found out the secret behind his miracle election win.
During the last election campaign, in fact, I must admit I was saying to myself, you know what? Where are you? Where are you? I'd like a reminder, if that's okay. The message I got that day was, Scott, you've got to run to not grow beard.
Unfortunately, God, having used up his miracle for the year to get Scott Morrison elected, was forced to let the pandemic run wild. Then there was this surprising confession.
I've been in evacuation centres where people thought I was just giving someone a hug and I was praying. And putting my hands on people in various places, laying hands on them and praying.
Mate, keep that stuff for the prayer room. Actually, don't. And we celebrated a first birthday. Whose?
COVID Safe.
The COVID Safe app.
COVID Safe.
The COVID Safe app.
Ah, yeah, the COVID Safe app. The only words we heard more in lockdown than sourdough recipe and Norman Swan. Whatever happened to that?
There are calls for the federal government to ditch the COVID Safe app once and for all on the eve of its first birthday.
Oh, no. And after Channel 9 News went and organised the world's saddest birthday party and everything. COVID Safe cost more than $14 million and found only 17 cases, which works out to over $800,000 a case. The cases must have been Louis Vuitton. Meanwhile, the Shadow Minister for Nobody Knows Get Researcher to Google Before We Air, whoops, had multiple cracks at getting on the news.
Their app is a turkey. You'd be better off
taking your pet rock in your pocket or your lucky rabbit's foot. Time to blow the candle out, time to put the cake away.
Oh, just pick one metaphor and stick with it, Bill. So the app costs too much and no one uses it, but can't we just keep it running in the background?
Government officials behind the COVID Safe app say it could cost taxpayers up to $200,000 a month to operate. Almost $300,000 has been spent on a report assessing how effective it actually is.
Here's my report. Not very. Cost, zero. Which brings us to today, Wednesday. The National Cabinet has agreed to fast-track COVID vaccinations for Olympic athletes heading to Tokyo. In related news, my nan has started training for the discus. And an issue that's not going away. This week, another innocent truck got wedged under Victoria's Montague Street Bridge. But this is more than your average truck-up. The Montague Street Bridge is a Melbourne celebrity, somewhere below Kylie Minogue and above Danny Minogue. It has been the site of at least 200 collisions at the time of recording, including one occasion when the bridge was hit twice in 5 hours. For more on this, we sent our investigative reporter, Nina Oyama, to the scene.
Australia is a land of iconic bridges, from Sydney Harbour to the Story Bridge, to the Ross Bridge, to Todd Wood and Merrill Bain. But for me, no bridge is as iconic as this one, the Montague Street Bridge, a Melbourne institution that has been slammed by truckies almost as often as your mum.
Another driver has fallen victim to the Montague Street Bridge.
The notorious Montague Street Bridge.
The notorious Montague Street Bridge.
The notorious Montague Street Bridge.
The Montague Street Bridge was erected in 1914, the very same year that World War I also began. Together, the two would be responsible for a combined total of over 20 million deaths. In the 1930s, Montague Street was raised to prevent flooding. But when the council asked the Minister for Railways if they could also raise the bridge, he said, nah, why bother? In 2016, after the bridge was hit over 100 times in 6 years, the Victorian government installed this warning gantry, which worked so well after its installation, only 14 trucks have collided with the bridge. Now the bridge has a cult following in Melbourne, including a website which keeps account of how many days it's been since another truck slammed into it. And ever since then, Montague Street Bridge has been the place to go to if you want to turn your truck into a convertible. I'm Nina Oyama. Back to you, Charlie.